Marcus Freeman had not spoken to the media since Notre Dame knocked off Stanford way back on November 29th. And after everything that has happened since then, this was the most revealing press conference of his entire tenure. We're breaking down everything the head man said, coming up on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm Tyler Wojciak, Notre Dame alum and Fox Sports producer, and I really appreciate you joining me here on Thursday, January 15th. Thanks as always for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day. Before we get rolling, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube and following the show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, tomorrow is the Friday mailbag, so this is the last call for questions. As always, you can submit yours in the YouTube comments or on social media. You can find us on X at Locked On Irish and on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, Marcus Freeman finally spoke publicly for the first time since late November, and considering all that has happened around the Notre Dame football program since Notre Dame beat Stanford in Palo Alto, from the playoff snub to his rumored interest in the NFL and the NFL's interest in him, the transfer portal, coaching moves, all kinds of things. There was certainly a lot to unpack from this press conference. We're honestly not even going to be able to get to all of it because he covered so much ground. So today, we're going to focus on the most important takeaways from Marcus Freeman's press conference. We're going to start with what Freeman revealed about his future in the NFL, the college football playoff, and he even talked about the USC rivalry coming to an end, or at least coming to a halt. Then we'll dig into Notre Dame's portal philosophy and some roster decisions and Marcus Freeman's thoughts on some of the new acquisitions. And finally, we're going to close it out with some key injury updates, Jalen Snead's decision to come back for a fifth year, and another key portal target Notre Dame is closing in on. But the first thing that Marcus Freeman talked about, and the first thing that we're going to talk about today, is his forceful defense of himself and his family, and he thanked Notre Dame and law enforcement for backing him after his accusations and everything that he has had to deal with in the past week. And he expressed frustration with one local outlet for sensationalizing the story, and he made it clear he's ready to move forward without further comment. I expected him to talk about it. Obviously, there's no way he could ignore it, and I expected him to do it right off the top. But I was a little bit surprised at how really aggressive he was at that one specific reporter and that one outlet. And I'm not criticizing him at all. Like, now that all the details have come out, the statements and the video as well, like, it's very clear that he did nothing wrong. Vinny, his son, did nothing wrong. And honestly, the one who accused Freeman in the first place was not only in the wrong, but that person was the instigator. So he was totally in the right to call that person out, but considering Marcus Freeman is so media friendly, it was just a little bit different to see him go after someone like that. But as I said, he had every right to do that. So kudos to him for getting that out of the way. Like I said, now we can all move on after that just ridiculous story that was clearly meant to draw attention via the headline, but there was no real story there then, and now that story has officially closed. The one thing that everyone was eager to hear Marcus Freeman talk about was the NFL's interest in him and his own interest in going into the league. And he reiterated that he is the head coach at Notre Dame and framed NFL interest as a byproduct of team success, not a distraction. He said he's even used those conversations with NFL general managers and executives as learning opportunities so that he could improve as a coach, not as a signal he is looking to leave. And he did not make any long-term commitments to Notre Dame, which is something I know a lot of Notre Dame fans wanted to hear, but he reinforced his commitment to the Irish for this season. The way that I interpreted this was that he's clearly coming back to Notre Dame, and I think that it's possible that he'll be around not maybe much longer, but beyond 2026, because there are some who believe that Marcus is going to be around for 2026. They're going to go all in on this season, and then he's going to bowl. I am not of that belief. Could it end up happening? Sure, but I also think it's possible that he could stick around for 2027, 2028. Who knows? But I could not believe how some other people interpreted what he said as if he's going to leave this offseason. And look, I don't know if it was just rage bait or maybe I'm just a little bit more used to seeing how Freeman conducts himself at these press conferences, especially when he's talking about himself, because to me, that's about as emphatic as he is going to get. And for the record, when I saw some people quote that tweet that went viral when Marcus Freeman, it was just a tweet of Marcus Freeman's response to the questions about the NFL, and he just said he's the head coach at Notre Dame and talked about his conversations with the NFL and things like that. I just don't understand how I could see that video. I could see how everything has transpired in recent days and say, yeah, clearly Marcus Freeman is coming back this year, and then someone could interpret it completely differently. Like, there was a few guys from Barstool, and look, I'm going to be honest. I'm recording this really late at night. I would never say anything mean about other people in the media space. Like, we're all trying to do our thing, make good content and things like that. But I saw 3 people who all worked for the same network, and I would say of the 3, there's probably 7 combined brain cells among the group. And they basically all referenced Marcus Freeman's comments as if he is a certainty to go to the NFL this offseason. And I just don't see it that way, because Notre Dame has actually been very proactive ever since Mike Tomlin went down. They were not proactive when there were the rumors about him going to the Giants. But hey, just before I started recording this, the Giants appear to be on the verge of hiring John Harbaugh from the former coach of the Baltimore Ravens. So we could eliminate the New York Giants, but then the Pittsburgh Steelers were obviously the next team that everyone was associating Marcus Freeman with. But literally within the hour after Mike Tomlin decided to step down, Notre Dame announced a press conference with Marcus Freeman the next day. To me, that was them being proactive, like, hey, we're not going to let this spiral, especially considering Notre Dame is still trying to lock down a few portal targets. So they had to eliminate that conversation as soon as humanly possible. Marcus Freeman went up, reinforced his commitment to Notre Dame, and said he never even had to reevaluate his decision and that he was always dead set on returning. But look, some people just want him to leave. People who are not Notre Dame fans, they want to see Marcus Freeman go to the NFL because it would be bad for Notre Dame. But Marcus Freeman made it clear he's going to be around at Notre Dame this season. The one thing that I was a little bit surprised about here is how unprepared he looked when he answered Tyler Horka's question about whether or not he was interested in the NFL, because he was asked about the NFL in multiple ways. It was about the interest from them, conversations that he had, his long-term future. But Tyler Horka from Blue and Gold just said straight up, do you want to coach in the NFL? Do you have any interest? And he stumbled a little bit. He was slow to respond, but he said he doesn't want to now. He's never done it before, but he also kind of left the door open. He said maybe down the road that could be something, but he doesn't want to waste time thinking about something that is well in the future. Like I said, I know Notre Dame fans want him to go up to the podium and say he's at Notre Dame forever. This is the only place he wants to be, but he's never done that, and he's not going to. And if he did, he would honestly lose some leverage at Notre Dame, because then they could get a little bit complacent. It honestly reminds me when LeBron James was with the Cavs, and if you aren't familiar, I grew up in Cleveland, big fan of the Cavs, the Guardians, and unfortunately the Browns as well, but I'm a little bit more apathetic to the Browns. But anyway, when LeBron was with the Cavs, he would always sign 1 or 2 year deals. So that way, management, the ownership, everyone would always be going all in on winning not a national championship, winning the finals every single year with him on board. It's not a perfect strategy, right? Because I think if you have a little bit more security and you knew that LeBron was going to be around for like 3 or 4 years, you could go about your business a little bit differently, as opposed to going all in every single season and like losing all of your assets for the future. But in the case of Freeman, as long as he kind of keeps a little bit of pressure on Notre Dame, they will continue to support him with more NIL, more resources. I mean, the football facility is going to be open this summer, I believe. And then, things like being able to admit undergraduate transfers. The university is all in on Freeman, and I think Freeman is all in on the university, but there's leverage at play here, and Marcus Freeman did a good job of maintaining leverage, even if he didn't come out and say everything that Notre Dame fans wanted him to hear. But the most important thing he said in all of this was, everything that I want and everything that I need personally can be achieved right here as the head coach of this program. That's about as good as you're going to get from Marcus Freeman in that press conference. He also was asked about what he got out of those conversations with NFL executives, and I thought he made an interesting point when he said he hopes that the NFL has continued interest in him, because it means the team has has been performing well. And that's true. Like, I made that point on the show this week when people were getting frustrated seeing Marcus Freeman's name come up in coaching rumors. I was like, hey, if your head coach is coming up in all these rumors, it means he's doing a good job. And Marcus Freeman has done an excellent job as the head coach of Notre Dame. I also thought it was interesting how he said he didn't feel like he needed to make a statement every time a job opens up, which to me means that someone probably had to convince him to say something after all those rumors with the New York Giants, and Freeman referenced his tweet specifically. It was obviously the smart move to come out and say something because there was just too much conversation about him going to the NFL, and I think it could hurt recruiting, the transfer portal, because it was right before the portal was going to open up. I've already been a little bit critical of the tweet itself, but hey, Marcus is an ambitious guy, and he doesn't want to be tied down to a statement in the future. He's going to keep applying pressure to Notre Dame, even though they're partners, just so that he can have everything he needs going forward. He was also asked about being snubbed from the playoff, and we had already seen a little bit of Marcus Freeman's response in the Here Come the Irish documentary that's out there on Peacock. Marcus Freeman even referenced that, but he acknowledged his disappointment and confusion surrounding the whole process, but took a lot of accountability and said that he and the program are moving on with a clear message: leave no doubt. He stressed that blaming the committee accomplishes nothing, and the responsibility now falls on the team to control their outcomes moving forward. And the best way to do that is by winning every single game. If Notre Dame wins every single game in the regular season in 2026, they will literally leave no doubt. They will be in the college football playoff, and they'll have a great chance to win a national championship. And I've also heard behind the scenes, Marcus Freeman is living that out on a daily basis. He's always been a hard worker, someone who attacks every single day, but I think he's taken that up a notch, even more as of late, ever since this college football playoff snub, because this dude is such an intense competitor. He feels wronged by everything that has happened, and he is going all in on winning in 2026, and I think you could sense that from the presser. Last thing I want to point out here before we move on, Freeman was asked about the USC rivalry and specifically Lincoln Riley's comments about how they were scared to play or whatever, or if they had lived up to their word. And Freeman audibly laughed and had this big grin on his face when he was asked about the Lincoln Riley stuff. And I would literally pay so much money to know how he really felt about Lincoln Riley and those comments, but he was poised, he was calm, and he admitted that he wanted to play anytime, anywhere, but it also admitted that moving a game from week 12 to week 0 was not in the best interest of the team. And as I've said over and over on this show, I don't believe USC made that offer to play during week 0 in good faith. They just wanted to, quote unquote, win the press conference and force Notre Dame into being the ones who turn it down. But Marcus said he's confident that rivalry will be back one day, and so am I. It'll happen once Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen leave USC in the near future. So Marcus Freeman made it clear where he stands, but what about the new players he just added to the roster? Freeman spoke in depth about the new players the Irish acquired in the transfer portal and also acknowledged the slow start. Let's break it down, coming up next. Thank you for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, make sure you check out our Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. Same show, same schedule, just no ads, and it works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Go to LockedOnIrish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like college football season, tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever, but actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why Gametime gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. The app is incredibly easy to use. I went from browsing to buying tickets in just seconds. I loved being able to see the view from my seat before buying, so I knew exactly what I was getting. The zone deals stood out too. You pick the section, Gametime picks the seats, and you save even more. Knowing prices include all fees up front makes the whole process stress-free. I was able to go to the Rose Bowl all thanks to Gametime, and that process could not have gone smoother. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. Today, we are reacting to one of the most revealing press conferences Marcus Freeman has ever had, certainly as the head coach at Notre Dame. And he was asked about his approach to the transfer portal and would they reevaluate how they start things off? Because let's all be honest, Notre Dame had a slow start to the transfer portal, but Freeman said Notre Dame is going to evaluate and debrief every portal cycle, but he defended this year's approach as strategic and intentional based on their needs, and he believes the staff executed well, while he did acknowledge that future cycles could look very different. Obviously, it's a little bit easier for Marcus Freeman to talk about the transfer portal now that they've already brought in 7 high-quality players, and they're on the verge of adding another in a defensive tackle from Oregon. More on him in segment 3. But I also got the sense that Marcus Freeman was not too thrilled with how they started things out. He said that just with the way he approaches everything, he wants to be go, go, go all the time, aggressive. He's an aggressive person. But Mike Martin, the general manager at Notre Dame, was like, we're going to run our race. We're going to approach this how we need to. Other teams are going to do their own thing. But Notre Dame had a plan. And at this point, it's proof that they executed it well. You might have noticed that all of the players Notre Dame added in the portal, none of them had even entered until after the first weekend. Now, does that mean Notre Dame did not target guys during the early portion of the transfer portal window? No, because we know that they really wanted Nick Marsh, the wide receiver from Michigan State. He was down to Notre Dame in Indiana. He picked Indiana. They also really wanted Jontez Williams, the former Iowa State cornerback, who is now at USC. Both of those guys committed to their schools before they even got to South Bend for their official visit at Notre Dame. So I'm sure Marcus Freeman was frustrated about that, as he should be, but still Notre Dame had a plan and they were able to pivot and execute efficiently and effectively. So that is not a coincidence. You have to have a strong plan, and Notre Dame has now been able to really upgrade their roster. They got 2 wide receivers from Ohio State. They got a starting defensive tackle from Pitt. They're on the verge of adding a defensive tackle from Oregon. They got a kicker who started in the Big Ten. Like, they're adding big-time players here. These are not scrubs. And they also got a cornerback who started a few games as a true freshman at Michigan in Jane Sanders, and DJ McKinney, who is number 3 on Dane Brugler's big board for the NFL draft going into the season. And yeah, his stock took a little bit of a dip, but think about what he's going to do under Mike Mickens' coaching when he's surrounded by great players. So this is a really good transfer portal class. Even though it started out slow, Notre Dame could still learn from this experience and be better down the road. But I don't think you can criticize what has become of this class. So they had a bunch of different guys that they liked, and they landed the vast majority of them. And of the guys that they were able to add, a lot of them are undergraduate transfers. And that is certainly a shift compared to where Notre Dame was in the past. And I'm not even talking about like 5-6 years ago. I'm talking about last year. And Freeman credited admissions leadership for adapting to the changing college football landscape and allowing more undergraduate transfers than in the past. He emphasized the process remained selective and collaborative, not like a wholesale shift in academic standards at the university. Mickey Keeter got a lot of love today, and for good reason. She runs the admissions at Notre Dame and has become a major major ally of the Notre Dame football program. I've mentioned it before on this show. I don't think I mentioned it recently, so if you've heard this story before, I'm sorry. Bear with me. I transferred into Notre Dame back in 2015. I spent my freshman year at Holy Cross right across the street, and I can just tell you that transferring into Notre Dame was a long, arduous process. It was grueling, had way more steps than any other school that I looked at. The timeline, it took way longer. It was just not a whole lot of fun, and it was really frustrating for me, and I really wanted to go to Notre Dame. So imagine in the transfer portal where things are moving at warp speed, that is not going to work well for Notre Dame. And now it seems like the university is finally caught up when it comes to bringing in undergraduate student athletes. Pete Sampson from The Athletic pointed this out. Of the 7 transfers Notre Dame has added in this portal cycle, 6 have multiple years of eligibility remaining. In the previous 5 off seasons, Notre Dame took 29 total transfers, and 27 of those 29 were one-year grad transfers. This is a shift in philosophy that should pay off well for the Irish this year and in the future, because now you're bringing guys who can start immediately, like Francis Brew is going to play on day one. Spencer Porath, the kicker, is probably not going to be competing with Eric Schmidt for that long. I expect DJ McKinney to start in some capacity. It's either at nickel or maybe he's just going to be rotating in heavily with Christian Gray. But these are big-time acquisitions. And then one of those wide receivers, Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter, one of them is probably going to start as well. But they're not just one-year rentals. They're going to be around the program in the future. And the fact that Notre Dame was able to land so many undergraduate transfers also is another sign that Marcus Freeman might be around for the long haul. So that is a big shift for Notre Dame and the university, and it bodes really well for the future. And then as Marcus Freeman was asked about specific prospects that they brought in, he spoke about adding 2 cornerbacks despite having 2 returning starters at the position. And he said the additions were driven by depth concerns and the need to be too deep at every position because Notre Dame lost Cree Thomas. They also lost Carson Hobbs and then Jadon Blair at safety, as well as Ben Minnick as well. So he stressed competition and said the incoming corners understand they're coming in to compete. Like, they're not going to be handed roles here because Leonard Moore is obviously going to be out in the field. Christian Gray is going to probably start as well. But I think they're going to rotate a little bit more liberally this year, maybe not at boundary corner because you don't want to take Leonard Moore off the field, but Sanders is probably going to have a shot at nickel, McKinney as well, and then Dallas Golden. Like Marcus Freeman referenced Dallas Golden by name when he was talking about who is going to start at nickel next season, and I think that position battle is going to be one of the more fascinating storylines of the offseason because we don't even know all the competitors just yet. Sure, Dallas Golden played nickel at certain points last season while Devontae Smith was out for an injury, but I'm not so sure that Notre Dame sees Dallas Golden's future at nickel. And the reason I raise that point is because Dallas Golden didn't play nickel before Devontae Smith went down, and the Notre Dame staff realized they couldn't trust Carson Hobbs anymore. So there is a chance they move Dallas Golden back out to the outside and let McKinney and Sanders or maybe someone else battle it out at nickel. And last year we saw just how much Notre Dame's depth was tested in the secondary when they were without Devontae Smith, and then Christian Gray and Leonard Moore were battling through injuries. They just didn't have a lot of options. And even though Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary are really talented, I'm very excited about their future. They're still going to be just in their second year of football next year, and Kerry Adams is going to be a true freshman. So it was a smart and savvy move to bring those guys in. And even if they don't start right away, I think they're going to contribute right away. One of the biggest needs Notre Dame had in the portal this cycle was not just defensive tackle, but adding help on the defensive end position. And Notre Dame brought in Keon Keeley, Francis Brew, and Marcus Freeman was asked about them both. And Freeman praised Francis Brew's effort level and motor, and he noted how rare it is for a big defensive lineman to consistently play that hard. And he also pointed out that, hey, he saw them live and in person, and he was really, really good against Notre Dame. Brew fits the mold of past transfers Notre Dame has poached from the ACC. They are good players who played really well against Notre Dame. Think back to Riley Leonard when he was at Duke, Bo Collins when he was at Clemson, Jared Dawson at Louisville, Malachi Fields when he was at Virginia. Those are just a few of the names, but they all transferred to Notre Dame the year after the Irish played them on the field. And Brew had a great game against the Irish, so he was already on their radar. Then they add Charlie Partridge, the defensive line coach who recruited Brew out of high school. So those were all key factors, and I think Marcus Freeman is very excited about what Brew can do right away. And then when he was asked about Keon Keeley's return, he basically referred to it as delayed gratification, something that he references a lot, and he said he always believed Keeley was in Notre Dame fit on and off the field, but it's been a few years since they talked. But he said that after their first conversation, he was like, yep, that's the Keon that I recruited. He's going to fit just right at Notre Dame, and they feel strongly that they can get the best out of him. I think it's telling that of the 3 Alabama defensive linemen that we have talked about the most in the portal, not just Keon Keeley, but also the package deal with James Smith and Rousseau, all 3 of those guys were really highly rated out of high school, but they didn't produce that much at Alabama. Is that a coincidence? Like, were they all just held back at Bama and their better days are ahead? Notre Dame certainly believes that with Keon Keeley. Ohio State believes that with the other 2. But you definitely would not have said that about Alabama defensive linemen way back in the Saban days. But it might be true under Kalen DeBoer that these highly rated defensive linemen are not maximizing their potential when they're playing for the Crimson Tide. But Notre Dame is going to have a great chance to maximize Keon Keeley's potential as well as Francis Brew's because they both have multiple years of eligibility. Marcus was asked specifically about Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter, the two former Ohio State receivers. And even though they're 1 year apart, Mylan Graham is going to be a redshirt sophomore this upcoming season. Quincy Porter is going to be a redshirt freshman. They have similarities in the sense that they both have history with Notre Dame. Freeman already knew both receivers well from recruiting them in high school, and he felt confident in who they are as players and people, and he emphasized that those existing relationships and familiarity were key factors in bringing those guys in, and Notre Dame recruited them both very aggressively, and Freeman himself got a taste of delayed gratification, which is a sentiment that he preaches about all the time. And it's funny to think about how Notre Dame added Quincy Porter, who was a 5-star in the class of 2025, and Mylan Graham, who was a 5-star in the class of 2024. And I think back to how much we complained about wide receiver recruiting during those cycles. Like, just think back a few days ago, right? When there were some Notre Dame fans out there who were getting real worked up because Scrap Richardson entered the portal. When Scrap Richardson got offered by Notre Dame, it was extremely late in the cycle. He had never played wide receiver before at his high school, and Notre Dame just needed a body at wide receiver, and Richardson was just an intriguing athlete. So they replaced Scrap Richardson, who wasn't even on the national radar whatsoever, with a guy like Quincy Porter. And if you want to go in the class before that, Notre Dame replaced some of the guys who left with Mylan Graham. So both of these guys are hoping to thrive in a new setting, and if one of them plays up to their potential, it could be scary. But the long-term future of the wide receiver room is extremely bright. All right, Marcus Freeman provided a few critical injury updates on Wednesday, plus one veteran linebacker announced he's coming back, and the Irish appear to be in great shape for adding another defensive tackle in the transfer portal. We're breaking it all down, coming up next. All right, we are back here on Locked On Irish reacting to Marcus Freeman's latest press conference. And like I said at the top, he covered so much ground in this 30-minute press conference. We're not going to be able to hit on everything he said. But one thing that really stood out to me were the injury updates for Kingston Viliamu-Asa and also linebacker Drake Bowen. Because going into the day, we didn't even know that Drake Bowen was hurt or that he was recovering from an injury. But Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily reported that Drake Bowen was playing through a torn labrum in his hip throughout most of the 2025 season, so he had to have surgery, and he's obviously not going to be able to practice in the spring, but I'm not concerned about that at all. Drake Bowen is not one of those players that really needs to be out there on the field for spring practice, but Marcus Freeman said that Bowen should be able to participate in some capacity in workouts. Like, he's not going to be out there in pads, but if he's able to work out during the spring, that certainly bodes well for the summer and the fall, so I expect he'll be back 100% by the beginning of fall camp next season. So that was a newer update, but we've all known that Kingston Viliamu-Asa is recovering from his torn ACL injury that he suffered in the final home game of the season, late September against Syracuse. That was just so sad seeing him go down with that injury. Well, I guess I shouldn't even say we saw him go down. We just heard about it after the game because he was able to walk off the field on his own power. But if we're looking for some good news here, Marcus Freeman said he believes that KVA would be ready to go at the start of the season, but I'm a little skeptical about that. Marcus Freeman did say not all ACL tears are the same, so you never really know what you're going to get. And even once he's back, he's not going to be 100% healthy. He's not going to be playing like the KVA we have become accustomed to from the past seasons, ones who's very explosive off the edge, a player who can bend, who can do all kinds of different things. Like, he's still going to be a productive player, but I don't think he'll be anywhere near 100% until, let's say, late October, maybe early November next season. He'll still be able to go out there and rotate with the guys, but considering he suffered the injury so late in the season in 2025, it's just going to be a long road to recovery for him. And this is actually his second ACL tear. I believe he tore his ACL his sophomore year. Maybe it was his junior year of high school when he was at St. John Bosco, but we know how hard of a worker he is. We know how talented of a player he is. So I still have really high expectations for what KVA can do in 2026, but the good thing is he's going to have some time to ease back because Notre Dame got a really pleasant announcement from Jalen Sneed that we have not talked about on the show. This did not happen on Wednesday, but Jalen Sneed announced that he will be coming back for his fifth and final season for the Irish. If you told me when he was a freshman, way back in, when was that, 2022, that Jalen Sneed would be at Notre Dame for 5 years, I would have said, you're insane. because one, he was a 5-star. I thought he'd probably go to the NFL early. And then even throughout much of this past season, no one was expecting Jalen Sneed to come back for a 5th year. As a matter of fact, a lot of people thought he was going to transfer after the 2024 season. But here we go. Jalen Sneed, 1 more year. And even though it's been a little bit up and down throughout his career, he has racked up a lot of numbers. In the past 3 seasons, he has played in every single one of Notre Dame's games, and he's combined for 107 total tackles, 12.5 TFLs, 6.5 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles, despite the fact that he only started 11 times. But from the moment that KVA went down with his injury, the importance of Sneed coming back for 2026 went way up. And I'm sure that he probably got a nice little raise out of that. And going into next year, you're going to have Drake Bowen, Jay Nosberry, Jalen Sneed, and then Matt Framo, who's going to be a true sophomore. And then you'll have KVA as the 5th guy sort of easing his way back. But going into next year, Sneed is going to be an X factor because they can use him off the edge to get pressure on the quarterback. We know how good he is at that. So as Notre Dame tries to figure out all the pieces in the defensive line, having a guy like Sneed who can get in the backfield on pretty much every single down is a huge asset for the Notre Dame linebacker room and also the defense as a whole. So we thought that was going to happen. We expected that, but now it's official, and that's huge for the Notre Dame defense. All right, the last thing I want to talk about on today's show, transfer portal again, and Tion Gray has emerged as Notre Dame's top remaining interior defensive line target, with multiple national analysts crystalballing him to the Irish even before his visit to South Bend. He is supposed to be on campus today, Thursday. I don't know if he's actually going to be able to make that visit. I heard that there may be some issues with just inclement weather trying to get him into the South Bend airport, but either way, whether he makes a visit or not, I believe he canceled the potential visit to Missouri. And as you see all these crystal balls roll in, that's usually a good indicator that he's going to end up with the Irish. And Tion Gray is a beast, literally. He's 6'6", 336 pounds, and could be an anchor up the middle. He is the true nose tackle that Notre Dame has been missing in this portal cycle. He's got size, he's got power. And even though last year he wasn't a starter at Oregon, he was their 3rd defensive tackle, played over 200 snaps, so he's got experience, and he was just sitting behind 2 future NFL players. And still, despite the fact that he was a reserve player, had 18 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and he also blocked a kick. So he's going to be handling a lot of dirty work for the Irish defense if he ends up committing to the Irish. And if they do land him, I think he would perfectly complement their additions they made, like Francis Brew. And then you've got Keon Keeley off the edge with Bryce Young and Boubacar Traore coming back. So you've got a situation now at defensive tackle where you could have Francis Brew and Tion Gray out of the portal, hopefully get Jason Onye back, and then you also have Armel Mukum back, and then Cole Mullins, Christopher Burgess, Sean Sevillano. Like, if any of those guys take a big step forward next season, Notre Dame could have a really solid rotation at defensive tackle, and that is not something I would have said just a few days ago. So Notre Dame appears to be in great shape there as well. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. And if you enjoyed today's show, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube and following along on your favorite podcast platform. Please like the video, rate and review the podcast. It really helps the show grow. And don't forget to get those mailbag questions in for tomorrow's Friday mailbag. As always, submit them in the YouTube comments or on social media at Locked On Irish on X or at Locked On Irish Pod on Instagram. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. I'll see you Friday.